to get into our 2 segments from now. We're going to get into Q&A, and I want you to start formulating questions now about what you've heard. If it doesn't make sense, please say it doesn't make sense, or saying, how does whatever help me in my business? That's going to be really that's going to be really crucial. So thanks again, Rosanna. Thank you, Mark. And I'm so excited to have Alan Stein. He is the president of Tanglewood Conservatories. He has one of the most unique business models I've ever seen in my entire life. If you're even thinking about joining an organization, you have to come on board with Tanglewood Conservatories. Alan's going to be talking about the natural laws. That's the DNA of life. And he's going to help us understand how generating massive referrals tie into the natural laws. Alan, take it away.
Sure. So we're talking today about generating massive referrals. And, I got a question for everybody. What's better? Is it better to have more referrals or fewer referrals? So you could just write that down if you want. But so somebody at our company asked this question on a mastermind call this morning. They said, so is it always better to have like more and more referrals? And, that's a great question. So if you have more higher quantity of referrals, that can easily overwhelm the systems that we have. So it's not always better to have more. First, you would think, well, generating massive referrals, the more we have, the better it is. But that's not always the case. If you dig a little bit deeper, too many can overwhelm. So maybe we don't want more and more and more. Maybe we want, I don't know what, maybe better quality. But that doesn't always work as well, because if you think about this a little bit differently, you can understand that, well, if I had great systems in place that could handle more quantity, then we could handle, and then more quantity would be better. So, you can think differently about things, and that's one of the fundamental natural laws. When we start to study, there are actually infinite number of natural laws. Natural laws are the way that the universe works. There are many of these that have been researched and cataloged, and Mark has got those on the website. We can look at those and learn a lot from them. Even better than that is discovering our own natural laws. When we see something that's really amazing, when we're great students, we can uncover things about the way that the world works, the way that people work, and we can actually understand something in a new way that maybe nobody else in the whole world has ever discovered before. So that's what we call thinking differently. So like Einstein said, you can never solve a problem on the level on which it was created. So what does that mean? So if you are creating the situation that you're struggling with, who else created it but you? So you've created it. What's the likelihood that you're going to be able to come up with a solution in the same way of thinking, which is normal way of thinking, that's going to solve the problem? So according to Einstein, not going to happen. So we need to learn to think differently. So what does that mean, to learn to think differently? So, so I was asked to do this presentation, I don't know, about a week or so ago. And normally when I do talks like this, I spend some time preparing so that I can do a great job at presenting and bring value to people. And as we get closer and closer to this, to today, I realized I just got back from a trip to Italy, and I've got a ton of business stuff on my plate, and I really didn't have the time to invest to do a great job. And so I wrote to everybody and I said, gee, I'm going to have to wing it today. I just don't have the time to put into it. And the response I got back was, that's great. But I have to tell you, as I got closer and closer to today, I started thinking, well, I'm not going to be able to bring much value if I'm just on the phone winging it. So I've got to do some preparation. So last night I sat down and I started to do some preparation work, and I wrote about it in my. I do a daily. I do a daily journal on my efforts to study natural laws, and I've been doing this for quite a few months now. Every night I take another natural law and I write about it, and I write about my experiences with trying to put it into practice. So I mentioned this, and I got this email back from Mark saying how disappointed he was in me. Why? Because I was going back to my old way of thinking, which is that I need to do preparation in order to do a good job. And I thought, okay, I'm going to leave everything that I was working on behind, and I'm just going to jump right into this. I'm going to really think differently. Now, you can imagine how uncomfortable that is for me. I'm an analytical person, and I like to have things all laid out and just so. So jumping in is not something that I would do normally, but I said, okay, we're going to practice thinking differently, which leads to acting differently and doing things differently. And so that's oftentimes a challenge, but that's often how you break through to what we call the next dimension. So the next dimension is another natural law, another principle that's really fundamental to successful living. So if I ask you the question, what's higher, a number 2 or number 8? So what would you say? Most people would say, well, obviously number 8 is higher than number 2. And that's true in that one dimension. But what happens when you get up to a number 10? So if you're on a scale of 1 to 10, you get to 10. Is that really the end? Well, just think about somebody who's, say, a high school sports player, and starts out his junior year and he's playing, say he's on football team, and he gets up to senior years on the varsity. He might be the best player in that school. He's got to be level 10. But what happens the next year when he goes off to college? Is he still a number 10? No. So that's an example of of moving to another dimension. When you get to the top of the dimension that you're in, you start in another dimension. So a number 2 in that dimension, in a higher dimension, is higher than a higher number, an 8 or 9 or a 10 in a lower dimension. The dimensions never end. There's always higher dimensions. So as we grow, as we learn more, as we become more proficient, we are always jumping dimensions. And there's a science to jumping dimensions, and there's a science, and there's a methodology to it, and there's an understanding of how to do that and how to do it effectively. It's really, really critical, because I think if you asked everybody, do they want to grow? Do they want to become better at what they do? Do they want to improve in really any areas of their life? Everybody would say yes. But how do you do that? What's the practical approach to doing that? So one of those is to study the natural laws, to understand the natural laws. Along with the other segments that we've talked about today, this is really critical. So, another really key natural law is the idea that there are no problems, there are only opportunities. So a lot of people might say, yeah, I kind of get that. But the understanding of that at a really deep level is revolutionary to the way that we think. And so when you start to put all these natural laws together, like thinking differently, next dimension, and you put that together with no problems, only opportunities, then you start to see it in a much, much different way. That's called a supernatural law. And that can lead you from ordinary understanding of natural laws to much higher levels, much higher dimensions, much higher frequencies of understanding how these natural laws work and how they work together and how they can help us in a really great way. So Anyone have any questions?
So, Alan, how can using the natural laws make us money with more referrals?
Good question. Do you think, Cheryl, that if you understand the way that people think, the way that people act, and the way that the world works, do you think if you understood that at a deeper level, do you think you would be able to make more money faster from referrals?
I see your point. My hesitancy is trying to figure out other people.
Yeah, other people, they're always the problem. Did you have an additional or a follow-up question, or anybody else have any questions?
Alan, this is Kevin. My question is, you said, yeah, the problem is always other people. Sometimes the problem is us. Sometimes we're not thinking correctly, and so how would we ourselves think in a higher dimension, in a better dimension than where we're at, that can help us generate that income?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So Kevin, what do you think, percentage-wise, if you had to say the amount of the problems that are other people versus ourselves, what do you think that percentage would be?
I would say it depends upon how humble you are. Because if I'm really arrogant, I could probably think that most of the issue, maybe 70 to 80% of the issue is other people. But maybe if I'm humble, maybe there's times when I'm not thinking correctly, that maybe I don't understand what they're thinking, and maybe I need to discipline myself better.
Yeah, so humble, that's an interesting concept. So it's like reality. So if you jump out of a building, you have the law of gravity and you're going to hit the ground. So, even if you don't believe in gravity. So, so you have reality. So the reality is, whether I'm humble or I'm not humble, what percentage do you think in reality is, my problem versus other people's problem?
I'm going to say 60-40, 60% my problem, 40% them.
Yeah, see, that's interesting. See, I think it's 100% my problem. I think it's always 100% me. I think that if I'm going to be really responsible in my life, for my life, that means I'm 100% in, regardless of other people, what they do, what they think, how they respond. It's all me. Right. So how do you get to that point where you say it's 100% my problem, and how does that help you overcome challenges with other people? I think it's like being humble. In what way? Well, as you were saying before, it's understanding and it's seeing how the times when I thought that I was right, and oftentimes the more I think I'm right, or the stronger I think I'm right, are the times when I discover I'm not so right, and seeing the truth of that, and maybe being beat up in life over that, maybe making mistakes and blaming others and going around and around and around in a circle until finally I see that, if I repeat my same patterns over and over again, then I'm only going to get the same result. And I think Einstein might have said that also. And that I really don't know at a core level how to do things differently. I only know what I know. Maybe looking at that video, you know, the big versus small video.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And where can we find it? Do you know where that is? Or we'll get the information out to people on that.
Yeah, I think the MVP network can find that.
Okay, excellent. Okay, good, very good. I appreciate that.